for leading us this morning. I want to start by just noting that 4 years ago, on this day, this very day, 4 years ago, and in the Gregorian calendar, this room was filled with about 1,800 people, and another 3,000 were just outside the door. Because just 2 days earlier, there was a massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill. 2 days later, this room was filled, not only with members of Addis Israel, actually probably not even more than half with members of Addis Israel, but with members of the entire community. Every faith you could possibly imagine, every color you could possibly imagine, any political agenda almost that you could possibly imagine was in this space. And I will never forget when we sang Olam Chesed Yibaneh, we will build this world from love, together. Every single one of us, every person, whether they knew Hebrew or not, those words caught on. And the reason we can't forget it remains it's because it came from a place of deep fear and pain. So when love emerges from deep fear and pain, it leaves a very unique kind of impression, lasting for quite some time. You walk back into that space. I'll never walk back in that space and not remember standing on this bima with about 75 other clergy members singing Olam Chesed Yibaneh. We will build this world from love. Hold on to that. And the names we will recite before Kaddish today of those lost at Tree of Life. Genesis chapter 11, one of the most famous biblical passages ever for anyone. The Tower of Bavel. Everyone on earth had the same language and the same word. The whole story is 9 verses. I'm going to read you the whole story of the Tower of Babel right now. Everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. Svachat u'devarim achadim. And it came to pass as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. And they said one to the other, "Come, let us make brick, and let us burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for the mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower with its top in the sky, heaven, to make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered across the world." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the humans had built. And God said, "If, as one people with one language for all, this is what they begin to do, then nothing they propose to do will be out of their reach. Come, let us go down and confound their speech, that they may not understand one another's speech." So God scattered them from there over the face of the earth, and they stopped building that city. That's why it's called Bavel. I'm still reading from the text itself, the Torah itself. Al kain kara shema Bavel. That's why it's called Bavel, because the Lord confounded the language of all the earth, and from there did God scatter them over the face of the earth. That is the entire story of the Tower of Babel. 9 verses. There has been a lot of ink for a long time spilled over trying to figure out what the sin of these people was. What the sin was. What God was so upset about when a group of people come together and build something remarkable or marvelous. This morning in our Torah study, I offered one possibility. I'm not sure it was convincing, but I'm about to offer 2 different possibilities for what the sin of this group of people actually was, and I think it has something to say about some of what we are seeing in the world today. One advantage of being able to read the Torah in its original Hebrew is that one can notice the parallel usages of particular words in the Torah, such that a word used over here and over here can influence one the other. And so there were a few words that caught my attention in this short passage. The verse is verse number 3, Hava nilvana livenim. Come, let us make brick. Nilvana livenim. Nilvana livenim. Let us build bricks. This verb noun pair appears only one other time in the entire Torah. Come, let us build bricks. With that root, bricks. One other time. That same day, Pharaoh charged the taskmasters and overseers of the people, saying, Lo tosifun la teven la'am lilbon halivenim. You shall no longer provide the people with straw for making bricks as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. The only other time in the Torah that verb-noun combination is used with that root is when Pharaoh uses it to talk about how the Israelites will be oppressed. So one thing I learn about the Tower of Babel story when I read it in Hebrew is that the language being used by the people who would build the tower is Pharaoh language specifically. This is the language of forced labor. It is the language of slavery, and it is the language of a power imbalance. The building of the tower is somehow corrupted by the way in which the tower was being built. There's another word that appears. That word is hava. Come, let us. It's a very unique word. Only 8 other places in the Torah is it used like this. Come, let us. And one of those places, and Pharaoh said to his people, look, the Israelites are too numerous for us. Hava nit chachmalo. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies and fight against us. This, too, is Pharaoh language. The language of the kind of insecure fear and insecurity that leads to the execution of forced labor, slavery, and power imbalance. Rabbi Ari Lamb points out that due to these kinds of textual allusions and more within the text, God isn't worried about the people's technological prowess. God is worried about a society built upon injustice. God is worried that this is the beginning of Egypt because it is rife with Egypt language. It might seem wonderful on the surface for a group of people to come together and build something as one. But beneath the surface, what was about to happen in Bavel and what God saw happening was dystopia. Beneath the surface, Egypt was about to emerge long before Egypt was meant to emerge. This was the first attempt at crowning a fascist pharaoh. And so God came down from the heavens and listened to what God said, Hava nerda v'nivlalam. Come, let us go down. God, using the same language as the people, says, come, heavenly hosts, we are going to stop this right now. And scatters them, recreating the diversity that chapter 10 seems to prefer for being fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth. God uses the same language, midah keneged midah, measure for measure, and rejects the attempt by humanity to build an empire off the backs of others. And this should, I think, allow us to look at history, even our own history, with honesty and transparency. We may not be able to erase what has happened here. We ought not erase it, but we confront it. We must confront it. And our kids should too. And you heard that earlier, so I'm confident they will. The second thing about this text I want to point out, everyone on earth had the same language or the same words. Well, the problem with the text telling us that everybody had the same words or the same language is that it's not true. Because the verses right before chapter 11, where it says everybody had the same language, are like this. From the coastland people spread in their lands, each with their own language by their clans and their nations. These are the sons of Ham, Noah's kids, by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. These are the sons of Shem, their clans, their languages, their lands. It is simply not true that there was only one language being spoken at the time. So it can't mean there was only one language in the land at the exclusion of any others. It must have been something else. Perhaps, as Rashi notes, Eitzah echat, they came with one scheme in mind, or the Netziv teaches, Aval kan garam lachshov davar achat sheyetze letakalat hayishuv. But here what happened is they all thought the same thing. And this was the problem of the settlement. They thought the same thing. Not that they spoke the same language, but that what came out of their mouths was always equal one to the other in intent. Uniformity was the problem with the builders of the tower. Not unity, uniformity. This would mean, therefore, that God scattering them was a conscious and desired move back towards diversity, which is a human strength. The Torah, in fact, insists on diversity, a necessary component of any community. And when the values of Bavel, when the values of Babel are sidelined, decentered, diversity is what emerges, and it becomes the antidote, I think, to what it is we are experiencing today in the world, or at least a significant part of it. There has been a lot of focus over the past couple weeks on Kanye, which of course is right. His blatant anti-Semitism and his blatant anti-black racism has to be confronted. My friend Rabbi Sharon Brous wrote, she said, are we overreacting? Are the Jews overreacting to this? No, friends, we're not. James Carroll once described anti-Semitism as the bug in the software of the West, an insidious, ever-present glitch in the system that excludes Jews from moral concern and too often paves the way for terrible violence. The conspiracy theory of Jewish power is a dangerous lie, one that has fueled pogroms, expulsions, and ultimately genocide. You know what else it fueled? The Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh. The shooter posted anti-Semitic comments towards HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. The synagogue Dor Chadash had participated, as we did, in HIAS's National Refugee Shabbat the week before. And the shooter said, I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. Screw your optics. I'm going in. HIAS likes to bring invaders in that kill the people. This is language, of course, that is borrowed from popular political figures and news networks. This is called the Great Replacement Theory, and it is weaponized against us and many other minorities. Kanye is simply a symptom of an age-old anti-Semitic trope which is fueled in every generation by the desires of a homogeneous empire. He's a tool of that, of white supremacy, which is this generation's way of letting the anti-Semitism out. Look, so we confront that anti-Semitism as well we should. But I'll tell you what's more concerning to me than Kanye's anti-Semitism. It's that there was no response or any consequences, real consequences, to something that I think was far more dangerous, no matter how many followers, from the former President of the United States, and I'm talking about number 45, who couldn't become another numbered president of the United States once again. When he sent out, I guess it's not tweeting because he had to create his own social media network in order to say things, no president has done more for Israel than I have. Somewhat surprisingly, however, our wonderful evangelicals are far more appreciative of this than the people of the Jewish faith, especially those living in the US. That would be you and me. Those living in Israel, though, that's a different story. Highest approval rating in the world. Easily could be the Prime Minister of Israel. And then he says, US Jews have to get their act together and appreciate what they have in Israel before it's too late. Look, it's all pretty bad, but at its core, what Trump wants is uniformity and support for the empire he wishes to have. He would like uniformity in order to get to a certain kind of unity, the one that is always building itself on the backs of others. And at its core, somehow the Jews are always to blame. He wants that age-old stereotype, thinking somehow that Jews, a group of people who disagree with each other more than any other people I know of, to be some kind of unified force with a similar mind. And when the former president of this country paints us, by the way, the majority of all of the Jews in this country, as the enemy, which is what he is doing, it comes with a real empire-like, pharaoh-like power. 4 years after Squirrel Hill and the Tree of Life, loads of violent anti-Semitism in between, loads of anti-blackness following. The threat is actually real. So if you are yelling about Kanye, I really hope you yell louder about number 45. Because that is where my fear actually is. Look, we have an obligation in this space. We have to honor the memories of those who were lost. And here's how I think we do it, and here's how Migdal Bavel, this Torah passage, helps us get there, by looking honestly at that which preceded us and courageously at that which confronts us. The lesson is, on this morning, standing in this place where 4 years ago it was filled with more love than you could possibly imagine, but from a place of deep pain, people stood with us to say, you are not alone. You are not alone. We honor them by looking seriously and honestly at what came before us and what currently confronts us. That is how we honor their memories. So we cannot turn away from the forces that continually seek to divide our greatest strength, which is our diversity, which is what God wanted and demanded. Unity from diversity. That's Migdal Bavel. Shabbat Shalom.